A recent sailplane video from New Zealand surfacing on the internet highlights perfectly the hazards of continued VFR flight into IMC conditions. It's Wednesday, 25 November. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blancolirio channel, and it's time for an update.
Spin. No stop.
The human vestibular system, which is a series of semicircular canals about the size of an eraser located inside your inner ear, is the system that gives you spatial orientation to your surroundings in the following axes, corresponding to roll, pitch, and yaw in an aircraft. Roll, pitch, and yaw. The vestibular system in a human cannot work without the aid of the eyes. The eyes and the vestibular system work together to give you the spatial orientation that you need to maintain spatial awareness of your surroundings. Which way is up? If you cannot see the horizon, you will lose spatial orientation very quickly and will quickly be unable to tell which way is up. And that's what happens when you're flying in the clouds. This is often hard for people that don't fly to understand. People that don't fly think, well, can't you just mount a plumb bob and tell you what bank angle you're banking at? No, because when you're turning in an aircraft, you're banking the aircraft and the resultant gravity vector is still right through the bottom of the seat. So what is your vestibular system indicating? If your vestibular system cannot see a visual reference to the horizon and you start banking the aircraft, that resultant gravity vector straight through the bottom of the seat, the inner hairs inside of your ears that are part of your vestibular system will stabilize and stand straight back up, and pretty soon you're in a bank like this thinking that you are perfectly straight and level. When somebody or something like your instruments say level your wings, your inner ear is telling you that you are in a severe right-hand bank. So what is the natural instinct to do if you don't believe your instruments or you fly by the seat of your pants? That is following the instructions of your inner ear. You will immediately roll the aircraft into an even steeper left-hand bank. What typically happens in these aircraft accidents, something called a graveyard spiral, not a spin. You haven't stalled the aircraft, you haven't induced yaw yet. You're simply spiraling the aircraft in. As the bank angle increases, the speed increases, you'll pull back harder on the yoke, tightening the turn and tightening the spiral right down until you either A, hit the ground, or B, break up the aircraft by exceeding the VNE, the never exceed speed of the aircraft, or C, break out of the bottom of the clouds and recover. So now with the technology of Flight Radar 24, you can actually see these accidents develop on the flight radar track. It's usually started by a series of turns to the left, followed by a straight and level period, followed by a further steepening of the spiral into the ground. And this happens to not only VFR pilots, but instrument rated pilots as well that are not current and qualified on flying instruments. Even though this is a sailplane video, the lessons in this video pertain to all of us. But there's a couple things I want to point out. These guys are flying ridge lift in New Zealand. Mountains, clouds, prevailing wind. The prevailing wind, when it hits the mountains, the ridge, it lifts on the windward side. The winds rise up over the mountains and then descend over the mountains. So on the windward side of the mountain is rising air, on the leeward side of the mountain or ridge is sinking or descending air. As the air rises, the temperature of the air cools at the standard adiabatic lapse rate of about 2 degrees Celsius per 1,000 feet. The dew point of the air remains relatively consistent, so as the temperature dew point spread decreases to within about 2 degrees, clouds begin to form. And these clouds will follow the sinking air and be lower on the lee side of the mountain. So if you're flying a sailplane and want to remain in good air or rising air or lifting air, you need to remain on the windward side of the ridge. If you If this ridge is obscured by clouds and you can no longer tell exactly where the ridge is, you may very well be blown over to the lee side of the ridge and find yourself in sinking air, sinking very rapidly into the clouds. So let's go inside and take a look at what happened to these guys. Okay, this video comes to us from Tony Morris on YouTube. Let's get the widescreen view going. Let's stop and talk about the instrumentation on board the sailplane. We've got a instructor pilot in the back and a student pilot in the front. Tandem seat arrangement, 2-seat glider. Here on the left is the airspeed indicator. In the middle are 2 variometers, or vertical speed indicators. Coupled with these variometers is a audio variometer, which you hear the constant beep, 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 beep. As the tone decreases, the aircraft is sinking. As the tone increases, the aircraft is rising. It's in rising air. Above that is a compass, and above that is a yaw string, helping you keep coordinated flight in the sailplane. Altimeter currently indicates 4,100 feet. The terrain, the ridge is off to their left. The height of that ridge is believed to be about 3,000 feet. So they're only about 1,000 feet or so above the terrain. That still yet needs to be determined exactly. Below that is a G meter. Here at the 9 o'clock position is 1 G, just like sitting here on in your chair. Just below that is 0 Gs. Here's the higher G limit that they've hit, the positive G limit that they've hit since the G meter has been reset. Here's the negative G limit since this G meter has been reset. Right about here is 6 Gs on your standard G meter. The blue handle is the spoiler, acts similar to a throttle in a sailplane in that when you come into land, you'll pull that spoiler lever back, deploying the spoilers, slowing the aircraft down, and increasing the rate of sink for landing. And then you can work that spoiler similar to a throttle when you're coming in to land. On top of the stick is a push-to-talk button for the radio. Again, the ridge is on the left. The prevailing wind, I believe, is from the right to the left, and the airport that they're operating out of is off to their right. And as you can see here, though we can't see the big picture, it looks to me like they've got clear skies off to the right towards the airport that they need to return to land eventually. But right now, it appears that they're working some weak ridge lift off of this ridge.
We've got a final drive 2 here, so that's okay. Okay.
Now it sounds like the instructor's talking him into it's okay to come off to the left here. They're about to close their window of opportunity to return back to the base in VFR conditions. The cloud clearance rules in New Zealand for sailplanes are slightly different than here in the United States. Now they're making a fateful decision, though we can't see the whole big picture, to head off to the left, and now they're working themselves into a V, a valley, in the clouds. Now they can no longer see exactly where the ridge is located, and they get into sinking air. Now I don't know why the variometer isn't sounding off, but watch this altimeter begin to unwind with nothing but clouds underneath them. 4,400 feet, sinking. They found a little gap in the clouds. They're going to shoot for that. And look at that rate of sink. 4,300 feet. He's holding his airspeed good. Typically you want to penetrate through sinking air, pick up your speed a little bit, and get past the sinking air. 4,100 feet. There's the variometer. Listen to that. Really sinking right down into the clouds. Being a sailplane, there's little or nothing they can do about it, and there's no artificial horizon on board this aircraft at all. Look at that speed increase. Now they're getting the turbulence, and they break out. Look at that G meter rise up to 5 or 6 Gs. They are now they've broke out of the bottom of the clouds, and he's going to pull hard and slingshot himself back up into the clouds. Very close to hitting the trees. I flipped the camera back right side up.
Oh, fuck.
That was the
Nose down.
high. They didn't hit the trees. That was the high G's that knocked the camera over. Now they're back up in the clouds,
We're pitching.
getting disoriented.
Oh, shit. All right. I see the hill.
The student in the front can see better than the instructor in the back.
So we have to get under it? Yeah. Go down. All right. Turn around. All right. Oh, shit. Spin. Nose down. I have control.
So, great call by the student in the front seat. I suspect that the student in the front seat is a power plane pilot. I suspect he's a rated pilot. He makes the right call. Whether that aircraft was in an actual spin or a graveyard spiral needs to yet be determined. I suspect they were spiraling out of the clouds in the classic graveyard spiral. But the student in the front made the right call to get the nose down and recover the aircraft if in the event it was in a spin, to get it in the cone of recovery for a spin, to get enough airspeed to get the aircraft recovered. The instructor in the back, I suspect, is very familiar with this terrain. I suspect he's been flying it for many, many years, and that complacency might have led him into this situation in the first place.
I have control.
So the student takes the controls because he can see better. He's got better situational awareness at this point, and they're going to, I believe they make a off-field, an outfield landing short of their desired destination. So let's go back and take a look at that G meter. They're just breaking out. He sees the terrain off to his right, close to the trees. He's going to bank a hard left turn and slingshot himself back up into the clouds. I think he's going to hit about 5 or 6 G's in this pull-up. Right there. Yeah, you can see that right up there past the 6G limit. Very disorienting. And this is what sets him up for the second spiral dive out of the clouds, completely disoriented.
Where are we? All right, we're pitching.
Do you notice the instructor said, all right, where are we? And the student is able to pick out, is desperately trying to find the terrain. Get a visual on the terrain.
Oh, shit. All right, I see the hill. So we have to get under it? Yeah, go down. All right. Turn around. All right, oh, shit. Spin. Nose down.
Boom, recover.
I have control.
Just right off the top of the trees.
I have control.
A very, very close call. So were they in a spin or a spiral dive? It's hard to tell from this data, but it takes a lot of guts for a pilot to recognize a spin type situation and call for and put the nose down as the rising terrain is coming up very quickly right into your face. The most common mistake where we see so many of these engine failures on takeoff, for example, is as soon as a pilot sees rising terrain coming at them, their first instinctive human reaction is to pull that stick, get away from the ground. That causes the aircraft to stall and possibly spin right into the terrain. So I hope this gives you a better understanding and respect for the hazards of continued VFR flight into IMC or cloudy conditions. Thank you so much for your support of this channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, I get thousands of comments that I noticed. Out of the thousands of good comments on this channel, fully 60% of the folks that are commenting are not subscribers to this channel. If you go ahead and subscribe, it helps spread this important aviation safety information throughout the internet. And especially thanks to the folks on Patreon that make this content possible, because often this is demonetized by the folks at YouTube, which in turn limits the amount of airplay this content gets. Thank you for your support. See you here.